My Govanen. Welcome to the Tolkien Lore Channel. I'm the Tolkien Geek, and this is going to be another video of mini scenes from the novels that were not included in the movies. I'm going to go over 3 as usual, so let's get started. The first one I want to talk about happens in Bree, and there's a lot of things about Bree that are different in the novel and the movie, but I want to focus on one particular aspect of it because it's kind of its own little thing, and that is Merry encountering ring wraiths in Bree. It's a really interesting little aside because it doesn't really play into the dynamics of what happens in Bree for the most part, other than it sets up kind of their eventual joining up with Aragorn to make sure they don't get killed. So in the novel, the way things go down is the hobbits come out into the common room after eating. They're kind of socializing. Merry doesn't really want to go into the common room, though. He actually goes out and walks around the town for a bit. And you have to remember, in the novel, they're not terrified of their surroundings in Bree. It's not nearly as creepy as it comes across in the movie. So there's no particular reason to be afraid at this point. The other hobbits end up meeting Aragorn, and in the process of talking to Aragorn in the common room, not the common room, their own rooms, they end up bringing Merry in, and by they I mean Butterbur and one of the hobbits who works for Butterbur. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But they bring Merry in, and then Merry tells him what happened. He was out there walking around, and suddenly he felt a presence that was not entirely benign, let's say, but he also felt like a really, really powerful draw to like go toward it and check it out. And it's not clear whether that's just his brandy buckish adventurous side or if it's something about the ring race that they're, actively trying to make him put himself in danger, basically. But at any rate, he tells him that he, got a little closer, and the next thing you know, he saw this shadow come up, and then he passed out. So then Butterbur, or one of his, employees, finds him, and they bring him back, and Aragorn kind of basically says, "You're brave, but kind of stupid," uh, which, kind of makes sense for a brandy buck, I suppose. Less so than it took, but still, same idea. But I think this scene is a little bit interesting because Merry is the only one to really closely encounter the ring wraiths on his own. We do get, of course, later the attack on Weathertop, where all of them come into fairly close proximity with a ring wraith, but there they're focused on Frodo, of course, because he has the ring and he puts the ring on. In this scene, we actually get a hobbit meeting them just kind of normally and at close quarters. And it's interesting that it's Merry, because Merry, of course, is the one who later ends up helping Éowyn defeat the Witch King. You have to wonder if there's a little bit of a foreshadowing going on in this scene. So I think it's interesting that it's Merry. But anyway, that's scene number 1. Now let's move on to a Two Towers scene. This scene comes about after Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli have met Éomer, borrowed a couple of horses, and gotten to where the battle between the Rohirrim and the Uruk-hai occurred. And they're looking for Merry and Pippin. They can't find him, but Aragorn does think that they might have made it into the forest. However, it's getting late. They decide, we're not going to go in the forest tonight. We'll resume our search in the morning because we won't find them in the nighttime anyway. So they build a fire. They are sitting around, or kind of just having their evening meal or whatever they're doing. And then one of them, I don't remember who it is, but one of them notices, and it may have been all at once, notices a figure with a cloak and a hood kind of at the edge of the firelight, and doesn't reveal who he is, just kind of stands out there. Aragorn then stands up, kind of says, "Well, hello, come and warm yourself by the fire if you need to, or, we can share food, whatever." And then he kind of just disappears out into the darkness. Next thing you know, the horses have all run off, and then now they're all thinking, something's not right here. This all kind of leads up to the encounter with Gandalf, and this is why they think Gandalf is probably Saruman, because this is probably Saruman. And it turns out they actually tell Gandalf about this encounter, and he says, "Yeah, that was probably Saruman, because it wasn't me." And I think this only really comes up in, I don't remember if it actually talks about it in the novel somewhere else or if it's in the Unfinished Tales, but somewhere it gives you the idea that what Saruman is doing in this particular scene is trying to kind of keep an eye on his servants to make sure they're doing his bidding, partially probably because they haven't arrived yet. And you get the idea from, and I'm pretty sure this is in the novel, I just can't remember where he says it, but Gandalf gives the idea that, he doesn't really trust his own servants. He went out to either meet them or at least spy on them to basically make sure everything was going according to plan. And that's when he encountered Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. Of course, he sets their horses free and scares them off because he doesn't want them to have any help at all if he can do anything about it. So it's just an interesting little scene, partially because it does set up that encounter with Gandalf in the forest, partially just because it adds a little bit of a creep factor to, Saruman isn't just sitting up there in his Tower of Orthanc. He's actually going out and occasionally at least doing things on his own, and that the fact that you've got a malevolent force out there wandering around is just a little spooky. So it adds a little extra to that whole progression to me. This last one I almost hesitate to call a mini scene. There's actually a lot going on in some ways, but it's fairly short and condensed. It's not a huge drawn out thing. So the Fields of Cormallen is an entire chapter in The Return of the King, but the point that I want to focus on is the actual Fields of Cormallen itself. It's kind of the chapter covers a little more than that, but the Fields of Cormallen are an area in Ithilien where Frodo and Sam are brought after being rescued from Mount Doom, and when they wake up, Gandalf is there. He basically tells them what happened, fills them in on the details that they missed, and interestingly enough, by the way, it's actually Frodo who wakes up first, not Sam. Sam is the last one to wake up, and Frodo even says, "I've been waiting for you to wake up, you sleepyhead." After Gandalf kind of catches them up, he tells them that the king is waiting for them, and of course Frodo's like, "What am I going to wear?" Because they've been wandering around in rags and orc clothes for the last several weeks. And Gandalf says, "Even your raggedy orc clothes will be held in high honor at this point, so don't worry about it." Gandalf actually kind of acts as their squire, gets them dressed and ready. They actually do give them nice clothes to wear, though. But then they go out to meet the king, and then, of course, they realize, oh my gosh, it's Aragorn. And Sam is just overjoyed because it kind of completes a thought that he had earlier in the book where he was talking about, how stories end. You don't know when you're in the story how it's going to end. But a lot of his comments in that earlier passage get echoed here, and it's a really nice completion. And two of the main things that happen that I'll wrap up with, Aragorn kind of takes them both by the hand, puts them on the kind of makeshift throne that they have set up in this in this area, and he basically, in both High Elvish and the Common Speech, says, or maybe it's just translating into the Common Speech. I'd have to look again, but he's basically saying, praise them with great praise, and a bunch of. It's a really cool scene because you can the Elvish reading the Elvish is just cool, but he's basically heaping them up with praise, and all the people who are gathered there are kind of responding in a, I hate to say, a church-like fashion, but it almost is kind of a church-like fashion. If you've ever been to a Catholic service, the priest will say one thing and then the entire congregation responds. It's a kind of similar feel. You've got the Aragorn being, in this case, in the position of the priest, so to speak. He's telling them kind of what to do, and then they all do it. Like I said, it doesn't really have the religious connotations, but you get that same kind of feel. And then after that, they have a minstrel come up, and he says, "I'm going to tell you the tale of Frodo of the Nine Fingers." And then that is kind of the final echo of Sam's earlier commenting on their position as being in the middle of the story, because he said, "I wonder if one day they'll ever sing of Frodo and the Ring." And so he's overcome with joy and just weeps for joy at that point. And it's a really cool scene because it kind of wraps up, interestingly enough, kind of that part of the story. And I could see why they didn't put it in the movie, because it would be another end scene, and that's already one of the criticisms that gets leveled against the movies as it is. There's too many endings, so I could see why they kind of skipped over this part. But I think it is definitely an important part of the story, and especially because it does, they kind of cover it a little bit in the end of the Return of the King movie, where he says, "You bow to no one," and then everybody bows to them. That's a echo of this Field of Cormallen scene, but it doesn't have nearly the power and the pathos, I don't think. So it's definitely worth reading, just to get that element of this is what really happened. So there are 3 more short little scenes that didn't make the cut in the movies. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please do share the video around, give it a thumbs up. Please also subscribe if you want to learn more about Tolkien, or if you want to, you can also follow me on Twitter at JRRTLore. And if you have other ideas for stuff that got left out of the movies that you'd like to see covered, please do leave a comment. I'll try to cover anything that's worth putting in a video. So I do pay attention to those. Until the next time, I'm the Tolkien Geek, signing out for the Tolkien Lore channel. Namaste.